What is going on, YouTube, and wherever you are listening to this show? Welcome in to another episode of Wildly Informed. I am your host, Brett Marshall. Alongside with me, as always, is my partner, Isha. Isha, how's the day going? How you doing today? You're ready to do a podcast?
I'm doing great. Day was awesome. I'm ready to do a podcast. I went to Excel to see one of the preseason games live. Unfortunately, it was their loss on Sunday. But I had some questions going into that game. I got some answers, and Marco Rossi got a goal. So overall, it was a fun time.
Yeah, anytime you can see Marco Rossi score a goal, that's a win. So
there you go. And I mean, it's preseason. I'm not as invested as everybody there who's just, I had that textbook, although still annoying hockey fan sitting in front of me who literally yelled, "Shoot the puck" at everything. And I'm like, this is preseason, bro. Like this is barely acceptable. Like,
well, he's got
regular season.
He's got to get ready to do it during the regular season.
Oh my dude, every time. Why aren't they shooting the puck? Why aren't they shooting the puck? I'm just like, oh my god. I mean, and he was in one respectively, like.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Just still trying to show his support, but I was just like, man, because like I'm there to see, like, okay, this is Heidt's last game. What is he gonna bring? There to see how Ogren plays in on that line as well.
Right.
To just watch how dominant and how excellent Damon Hunt has played. How Bogosian was just there, but was still the best player on the ice. So it was overall sweet. And we'll talk a little bit about Heidt and Hunt as well in this first segment. And then in our second segment, we'll dive into just the preseason at large and our thoughts on how long it is, how many games there are, and a few other things in our Puck Your Opinions segment. But we'll get to that in a little bit. Where do you want to start here in the first segment of the show?
Well, we're going to try this name on for size and start off with the analytics agenda, which we'll start this off with, like I said, it'll be the first couple weeks of the show. We'll do some quick hitters, 5-10 minutes discussing kind of some of the analytics that I enjoy the most and that I think are the most important. There's tons of them out there and ones that I don't even fully understand yet. But we'll talk about some of the more basic ones you might see on a broadcast or hear talked about often on this show. If we're talking about, what players have done, things like that. So we'll start at kind of the very high level, or I guess low level, depending on how you're looking at it. The 100 level analytics stat that we'll go over. And we'll start with one. I think that, it was kind of a little bit of background into these two. So Corsi and Fenwick, which, long story short, it's just they're fancy words for shot attempts is really what it boils down to. So, calling them an advanced stat might be a little bit of a stretch, but they're kind of the first layer as you dive into high danger chances, expected goals, which we'll do later on. Things like that. So kind of the 101 of it, it's typically expressed kind of in one of two, maybe three ways, depending how you spin it. We'll start with Corsi and then we'll take one level deeper into Fenwick because they're essentially the same thing, but Corsi is the one more, you won't ever see Fenwick said on a broadcast. You'll maybe hear Corsi or shot attempts. But if you're ever looking at pages where Corsi data is stored, like Hockey Reference, Natural Stat Trick, you'll see it expressed most likely as CF, which stands for Corsi for, CA, which is Corsi against, and then CF percentage, which is your Corsi for share, Corsi for percentage, however you want to slice it. What makes these stats a little bit unique is they're what's called an on-ice stat, which means like in this example, you see Kalen Addison has a Corsi for of 165. That does it, and as I said earlier, Corsi are basically shot attempts. In this case, CF, when there's not an I in front of it, means it's a on-ice stat, which means in the however many minutes that Kalen Addison was on the ice for what this sampled set of data is being pulled from, he was on the ice for 165 shot attempts for the Minnesota Wild. So those could have been him, but it also could have been whoever else was on the ice with him. And then Corsi against is very similar to that. It's just the other way. So it's how many opposing shot attempts you were on the ice against for, and then that percentage is just a ratio, like you'd calculate any percentage. So it'd be, in this case, 165 divided by 165 plus 153, whatever that is, comes out to about 52%. The way that Corsi is used and evaluated is, generally speaking, you want to have attempted more shots than when you're on the ice than allowing shot attempts. So, in this situation, you have different things. I don't know what data set you have pulled up, but and generally speaking, it's better to have more shot attempts for, fewer shot attempts against. The higher your percentage is above 50, the better of a game that you had. I think league average for this, I think I have this written down somewhere. Maybe I don't. I do not. But league average is probably right around that 50% mark, give or take 2-3% in either direction. And then you can take this a level deeper too. If you ever see like a lowercase I in front of it, as with any stat, it stands for individual Corsi 4, and that's going to be a player's like individual shot attempts in a game. So if they had like a 5v5 on ice Corsi 4 in a game of, let's say, like 20, their ICF might be 9. That means, in that game at 5-on-5, if that's the way you're looking at it, that player was on the ice for 20 shot attempts. He took 9 of them. A couple other ways. This is one of my favorite ways to see it over the season, and I just think this is an absolutely hilarious shot chart. This is from our friends at evolvinghockey.com. This is Joel Eriksson X Corsi chart, essentially, from last year. And you could just see from the lower hash mark to the goal line, basically, is where Eriksson Ek takes like 80% of his shots from. So on this, you won't see Corsi, you'll see what's called Fenwick. Basically, the only difference between Corsi and Fenwick is Corsi counts blocked shots. Fenwick does not. That's basically the one difference. So Corsi will count if a shot hits the post, if it gets on net, if it gets blocked, if it misses the net, if it hits the post, like if it hits 5 guys and then goes wide, like it'll count all of that as a shot. Fenwick, the puck has to, I don't know what the exact, exactly way they measure like a blocked shot, but the way I look at it is anything that gets basically to the goal line, whether it's a miss, hits the goalie, hits the post, whatever, that's considered a Fenwick shot. And most advanced stats will build off Fenwick shots, like expected goals, depending on the model that you use, is typically more based off a Fenwick shot because, in most cases, a Fenwick shot pretty much always has a chance, even if it's, essentially a 0% chance of becoming a goal. So we'll probably refer to this chart with Ek a couple times as we continue to dive deeper into it, because there's actually a lot of information that's on that chart. But I just always like showing that chart because like Eriksson X, like anything yellow is yellow. There was where he scored from. All the greens were shots on goal and all the oranges were misses. And it's just like all this guy does is shoot within like 5 feet of the net. And I think it's really funny. So hopefully that makes some sense. If it doesn't, if you go onto my Twitter, there is a link in my bio in an article called Analytics for Beginners. And I have it written in like paragraph form along with like some written examples. So if you want to read about that, feel free to go to my Twitter profile, click on that once, of course, you're done listening to the show, and then check that out. But
it's also in the live chat too. I just linked it in our YouTube chat, so you can just click.
Yeah. I forget we have that ability. I come from an audio only podcast, so where we didn't do live shows. So the capabilities.
No, but so essentially the theory is it's, better teams possess the puck more in the offensive zone. Offensive zone possessions lead to shot attempts. More shot attempts lead to more goals. Goals lead to wins.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think like there are obviously like certain situations where it doesn't tell the whole story. Like a lot of times you'll hear, maybe not a lot of times, but if you're on analytics Twitter or sometimes even on broadcast, you'll hear like the Corsi Canes, because the Carolina Hurricanes are notorious for having really, really good Corsi for and against numbers throughout like the whole season. Part of that they believe is skewed because of the way that the data collectors at the Hurricanes home rink, like they have a bias for tending to count maybe more attempts than other buildings would, stuff like that. But they don't always tell the whole story, and I won't really get into why, because that takes us to the next layer of high danger chances and expected goals and all this stuff. But generally speaking, yeah, the more shots you take, the more chances you have, the more goals you score, the more games that you win. And then on the flip side, the fewer shots you allow, the fewer shots to get to your goalie, the fewer shots go in, the less you lose, things like that. So as a team, the Wild have usually been pretty good at shot suppression of that Corsi against stat. Like Jared Spurgeon and Jonas Brodin are among like two of the best NHL defensemen in that stat, like consistently year in and year out, which is pretty cool. And like the Wild as a whole throughout kind of their whole, very true. Like the Wild as a whole throughout like their whole existence have always been a pretty good shot suppression team. Like they've always been a defense first team, which you don't really have to tell that to any Wild fan because of Kirill Kaprizov, we've never really like watched people spend entire shifts in the offensive zone. So that's step one.
There you go.
More to come next week. I think next week we'll take this a step further and we'll go into high danger chances, which is I think basically what this is, but better.
All right, there you go. There you go. Before we move on to the Puck Your Opinions segment, let's just quickly talk about, you know, it's been a week. Let's talk about the preseason. Anything that stood out for you? Let's just say any points of conversation that need to be had between you and I. Let's get them out of the way now before we do a deep dive in the next segment. And I just want to start off with, first and foremost, like I said in the intro, like I've been very impressed with Damon Hunt out of the crop of younger guys. And I know he's played pro and he's gotten some games of the Wild already, but like all that is adding to my conclusion that he's ready, man. He's ready. He was used more than Merrill in most of the games. He actually looked the most comfortable and composed player who was used in every scenario. Like the Wild are getting every single look at him this preseason, and in my opinion, he's passing every single test. Like I think if they need an extra guy, and he's the guy that they need to employ more than Merrill at this point. I think, you know, if it's a younger guy who's only 22, 23 years of age, this is the reason you developed him, to actually be that next guy up. And I know these aren't NHL games, but he didn't look completely out of place last year when he got actual NHL games. And I guess that's just like the final box that needs to be checked is, okay, made the team out of camp. Let's see what you got against when the points actually matter, against the big boys when the points actually matter. But like, where are you on Damon Hunt right now?
Yeah, I think we talked a teeny bit about him last week, and just that, you know, if it were us, like we might have him as the seventh defenseman in an essence. And like, while like when the final roster comes out, like John Merrill may be listed like as the 23rd rostered player or like the seventh defenseman. But if you listen, like I think Russo had a tweet, I can't remember if it was earlier this week or last week, but basically John Heidt says like he's earned playing time this year. Like he's earned a spot. He looks ready. Like we've seen maturity in his game. And like, obviously that's what you were kind of hitting on, all of those things. And like, I would completely agree. I think, you know, the preseason games, like we didn't really see him a lot with like the more stacked lineups. He was kind of more with those tweener areas, those tweener spots. Like here you're kind of playing with these bubble guys, and
he was the best guy out of all those bubble guys easily. Like
he was noticeably the best player on the ice. Like he was taking smart shots. He was making smart plays. Like obviously he's not going to, you know, take over a spot from Bogosian or Chisholm. That's not going to happen. But like you mentioned, I think they're at a point now where if there is an injury and, you know, the chances of all six defensemen playing 82 games, it's not going to happen. Like Damon Hunt, I think will be the first call. Like I don't think it'll be Johnny Merrill. I still don't think it's impossible to think that John Merrill could get put on waivers at some point this year if they get into a cap crunch with injuries and different things like that. And he's not the look they want. I would not be surprised if that's where he heads. Like, because for me, Hunt's the guy. You know, I think he can bring some things. You know, he can play a little physical. Like he does have a good shot. Like he's almost like a diet version of like Prime Dumba in a way. Like he'll play physical. Like he can be, you know, he can kind of be in your face. He can move the puck. He can shoot the puck. Like he kind of does all these little things here and there, which I think make him, you know, an intriguing piece to have. You know, as your quote unquote seventh defenseman. Ultimately, it comes down to is, do the Wild see more value in keeping him on the roster as a seventh D-man, going on those road trips, building bonds with the team, or do they want to continue to give him reps, give him ice time, and let him eat up big minutes for Iowa? I think both have their pros and cons for sure. But regardless, I think as soon as there's an injury, illness, whatever, it'll be him.
Yeah, he's been awesome. He's been awesome. Unfortunately, the guy who I was rooting for the most this camp here, Riley Heidt, sent back to Prince George, was sent back to the WHL, and deservingly so. From every preseason game that I watch, is just like he wasn't there yet. And whether
It's
it
a
was
big
like
jump.
it is a big jump, and I think there's just some. And correct me if I'm wrong, if this is the incorrect word, but there was just some hesitancy out there.
Yeah.
It was like he never like dropped to third gear from fourth and just went for it. Didn't take over and just show exactly like why he's there. And that tenacity and almost that, and I'm quoting Billy Guerin here, but that fuck you gameplay that he brings, there was none of that in the preseason. Now, were there some glimpses of him maybe trying to get that going? Sure. But it was just like, he wasn't dodging shots out there, but it definitely didn't look like he wanted to muck it up at all or get hit or play even close to a physical game. And maybe that's because in his head, he wanted to show off all his other skills. And then just by getting in his head a little bit, that's where hockey players can't just put it all together, get into that zen zone and just do their thing out there, which is what he was doing last year, all year in every game for Prince George. So a little disappointing just because he was a guy I was rooting for. I love rooting for a Western Hockey League guy. And he's one of those unique cases where like he's going to go back to Prince George, put up another, high 90 to 100 point season. And even his coaches down there and trainers have been like, look, there's nothing really more we can do for him down here. He's one of those unique cases that would benefit so much from having a year or two in Iowa, but due to the CHL and NHL rule, he's under 20 years old. He can't go to play in the American Hockey League or even ECHL, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think we saw a little bit, with like Liam Ogren too. Like I think there's this jump of, whether you're coming from Europe or the CHL or the AHL, like the speed and the way you have to process the game and think the game, it becomes difficult. Like the NHL is the hardest hockey league in the world for a reason, right? It's very difficult. And I think, we even heard a little bit from the coaches that at times it felt like maybe these guys were trying to over process a little bit, right? Like they were trying to think too much. And, I think some of the flashiness and the, like you said, kind of that fuck you and that go mentality, I think that it dials back because like, I don't want to make a mistake. I want to impress the coaches. I want to do everything right.
That's kind of what I was thinking as well.
Yeah.
It was more hesitant than like just scared or getting outgunned, outplayed. It was just like, where's that extra gear?
Right. Like similar to kind of what we saw, those first 19 games of Marco Rossi's like rookie season, right? Like they're just, it wasn't quite ready for that speed, but that doesn't mean the player's a bust. Doesn't mean they're never going to play. It just means they're still a raw prospect. Like the one thing that wasn't, debated, if you've caught a practice or even watched the games, like there is clearly lots of skill there.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like there's a guy that's talented, can play with the puck, has good vision. Like all of that stuff is still there. It's just, okay, now how do you bring in all the elements now? How do you refine those skills, polish your game? So like you said, not much left to prove in the WHL, like dominated last year, but I think for him, it's how can you be more dominant? How can you be the best player in the WHL this year? How do you elevate your game? And maybe that's not on the points. Maybe it's how do you be better in your own zone? How do you win more faceoffs? Can you add another layer of power play, penalty kill? Like what things can you do to continue to get better? And I think for him, like a big goal for his needs to be get yourself a spot on the World Junior team. Right. We saw Caden Bankier do some of that, right? Like,
I mean, that's less on him and more on this.
Right. But
crazy
make it where they can't not put you on the team, right?
Bro,
like,
Brett, let's be honest. Like, I feel like he's doing that already.
I agree.
He's not on the team. I don't know what, and coming from the resident Canadian, I don't know what the hell Hockey Canada are doing. They're literally doing the exact same thing they did last year, and that worked out so well. Thank you very much. Now I know as an American, you're like, yes, Canada, keep doing that. Keep making teams that are so easy for us to beat in the matchups. But
here's the thing: I want to beat Canada's best team, not their cutesy like. I feel like they always have an issue with roster construction, like at all levels. It feels like it's like they try to.
Well, Olympics they never have had to really because they just they're like, bro, it's so easy how we can construct this. Yeah. Our A, B, and C team will find chemistry, but it's because they've always had the pieces. Not to veer too off, the train tracks here, but like in 2 years, Canada's still not. I mean, they might, knock on wood, one appears, but they don't have the goaltending depth that every other top team has.
They have Jordan Binnington.
Oh yeah, sweet.
Who else? I don't even know. I know Binnington.
Vegas's goalie.
Aiden Hill.
Aiden Hill.
That's probably it.
That's probably it. Yeah, 2 years, a lot can happen in 2 years, but
the
still.
US has what? Allmark, Hellebuck,
Demko.
I mean, God, I hope he's able to get back right soon. Doesn't sound great for him, but that's.
I mean, John Gibson in 2 years is probably going to be one of the older ones, but like he's still
probably
good.
Yeah, all these guys would be Canada's one. Like
Mateo is saying it was hard. Yeah, screw that guy though.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it'll be. I'm excited to see just can he take? It seems hard to take another step when you're seemingly already the best of the best in your league, but seeing if he can find a way to elevate his game, even to like an even bigger level.
Hasn't won a WHL championship yet, let alone stamped his ticket to the Memorial Cup as a result. So maybe this is a year where like, look, the last 3 years I've been with PG, we've gotten close. We have one of the nicer rinks in the dub. We have a crazy fan base. Like let's dial it in. And like you said, let me polish some of the little things. I was already drafted. I'm already high on the Wild's radar. Like if I win a championship and put up, similar to same stats, but fix a bunch of other things that obviously will be reported and scouted internally. Like there's just proven that, okay, next year they're going to give him a serious look like they did again this year.
Yeah. And then shout outs to our friends, the MNW Young Guns, my former co-host Justin Baki on this a little bit of news today. Riley Heidt was announced as the 30th captain in Prince George Cougar history today as well. So
shout out to the PG Cougars.
Talk about taking that next step. I think he was an alternate last year, if memory serves.
Yeah.
And now, wearing that C on the chest, like I think, shows the team has obviously the utmost respect and confidence in him. So yet another Wild prospect who continues to wear and wear well those letters on their jersey. So.
Dude, I grew up in Prince George, man. There have been a lot of great captains, a lot of legendary players, from obviously the Bugard to Ham Hughes to Dustin Bufflin, who, let's just say, did not want to play there, but we're all glad that he did. Zdeno Chara played for Prince George as well. I mean, so many names to play at the CN Center and in that small community, which is like the last hub of like northern BC. Then it becomes like real, like very rural towns and villages. So like that's their NHL team is the Cougars. So to see them go far in the playoffs again would be sweet.
Yeah. Before we move on to like preseason general as a whole for NHL, there was kind of like one more takeaway I had, and this was on guys that did make the team and have earned that spot. And I think the one for me that just has really popped in preseason is Jacob Lauko. I don't know if is it Jacob? I don't know.
Jakob.
Is it Jakob? Soft J. So Jacob Lauko, who the Wild obviously got in that Vinny Lettieri trade that happened at the draft. And man, that is looking like an absolutely like sweet deal. Like, I mean,
last year they got a couple deals. I'm gonna say with Chisholm and then with and then with Lauko here.
Yeah, like the big splashes don't always have to be like it's great when it's a top line forward or top end defenseman, but like sometimes these sneaky depth adds are not, I'm not gonna say just as important, but they're still very important. And I think like
I would say they're just as important, to be perfectly honest, because they're like no risk, all reward.
Right. And we saw last year what like the lack of a fourth line kind of did, like especially after like the Duham trades at the deadline, like that fourth line of Vinny Lettieri and whoever else ended up being like Mason Shaw and Nick Patan and whoever else was on that line. I'm forgetting who else. There was another Lucchini was the other one. Like those guys they're not your typical like fourth liners. They don't do the things that you want, but Lauko, like just the things he's done well in the preseason are things that you want.
Yeah.
Obviously plays with tons of pace, which jives really well with Murat Huzadinov. Like we'll roll this into kind of that whole fourth line, because that seems to be kind of one thing they've held constant with Gaudreau and Lauko and then Murat Huzadinov. They've brought a lot of speed. I think it's three guys that also like play responsibly defensively. And we've even seen, like, I think he has 3 preseason goals already. Murat has 1. I think Freddie's got a couple. Like they've added, again, like kind of what you need in the regular season, right? It doesn't have to be a goal every night, but if they can chip in every now and again with goals, like we saw in preseason, and it wasn't like fluky goals either. Like Lauko had a really nice play against Chicago where he picked off the defender, like made a great read, stepped into the zone, almost beat the goalie, and Freddie comes in, stops on the post, crashes the net, buries a rebound. Right? We've seen him do really well in the penalty kill, and
he's quick. He forechecks well.
Yeah, forecheck speed, the physicality. Like, he's not known to be like a goon or guy that takes a lot of penalty minutes or fight a ton, but last year
he knows his role, and he's always all smiles while doing it too, which is what I love.
Yeah, I mean, we saw him. I think last year, I think he fought both Dewar and Duhaime, not in the same game, but I think like both in each of the Wilds and with the Bruins, he fought one of the Deweys, and it's like obviously that shows you have a guy that if the situation presents itself, like he'll stand up for his teammates or he'll drop the mitts. And I just think he's bringing a lot of, I felt like kind of what maybe our bottom six was missing last year. Someone who, he almost feels like I'll respect the Duhaime because I love him, like an upgraded Duhaime, almost to me, like physical, speedy, like has a little bit of scoring touch when he needs to be. Like, I just think I think he's going to end up being like kind of like a low key like fan favorite this year for a lot of people just because of the way that he plays. And I just like, I'm really excited. There's been some comments flashing on the screen at the bottom. I am really excited for him and the Murat Huzinov kind of duo. And as we said last week, I don't think having Freddie Gaudreau on your fourth line is a bad thing. I think that's going to be a really effective line for the Wild, and hopefully be a line that can take some pressure off every now and again, chip in some goals, play smart defensively, maybe draw some penalties, those types of things. So it's been really impressed with what we've seen from him in the preseason.
Yeah, like I said, this preseason has answered all my questions thus far. I mean, all but one. What is the opening night lineup gonna look like? But we're getting close to there where we're all pretty confident what it's gonna look like here. I've gotten to see a lot of the prospects who I really have wanted to see play at this level play. Like actually, O'Rourke looked really good in his last on Sunday as well, and I've actually been pretty impressed with the level of his play too. Obviously, he's not going to make the team now, or he may never be Minnesota Wild. But I was impressed to see how, I don't want to say easy it came to him, but how comfortable he looked out there. And honestly, Ogren looked pretty comfortable out there as well. In the games, the last two games that I watched, I think he's been fine. Has he like overly impressed me? No, but there's been nothing that I've been like super critical on other than just scoring, I guess.
Yeah, I think, there's a little bit of maybe that Riley Heidt syndrome, or maybe over processing the game a little bit at times instead of just playing the game and letting loose a little bit, which I think you've heard echoed a little bit from the coaches as well. It sounds like as long as Matt Boldy is healthy for the opening night, which it sounds like he's trending in that direction, and then he might even play here in this last preseason game, that Ogren will either end up being the 13th forward, or if they want to get him reps, as Trav just threw on the screen there. Yeah, I do think it means Ogren starts in Iowa. And again, as we saw with Marco Rossi, like as much as it like internally probably pains us, it's not always a bad thing. That should be a better team this year. It should give him a chance to play top power play, play top line minutes, maybe even just like build the confidence, get another chance to continue to learn the systems, things like that. And again, I think in a similar vein to Damon Hunt, where if there is an injury, I think more so maybe in the top six, I think, they've liked what they've saw in some other like those bottom six depth pieces, the Ben Joneses, the Travis Boyds, those types of players. I think they've liked what they've seen in them. They maybe slot into the bottom six role, or maybe like fourth line spot. But if it's top six, maybe top nine, Ogren's maybe the first one to get that call and he'll get a chance to make an impact. So I think he'll NHL games this year, but I think without like a sustained injury, he might spend the majority of the season in Iowa, which again, it's not my favorite thing, but we've seen that can pay off, and they've just liked a little bit more what they've seen out of guys like Johansson and stuff, which is fair. He's a young player, still making that transition. Like, looks good last year, but then again, I think the games I think he played were against like Chicago, San Jose, and Anaheim. Like it's if you're gonna have first, a career games, that's not a bad trio to start with.
No, and he only played 3 AHL games last year anyways before being called up to get that final look, because the Wild knew they weren't out of it. And he could very, very well just play his way into that role too. Like he could get point per game plus in the first like 10 games of the season. The Wild are like, all right, again, this kid's forcing us to bring him up here and see if he can keep that momentum going up here. And I remember a few years ago, it happened with the Vancouver Canucks. Now, Adam Gaudette hasn't done anything in the National Hockey League since, but Hobey Baker winner, unbelievable college career for being a later round pick. And it was the same out of camp. They were like, we don't know. They sent him to, at the time it was Utica, but sent him to the AHL, and he was like over point per game. They're like, all right, well, come back. And he never went back down the rest of the year. So it's one of those things too where you could just be like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, we've even seen it like a little bit different types of players, but like Mason Shaw, whatever, it's like 2 years ago, right? That kind of happened to him. He was kind of the last one cut, goes on to Iowa, gets named captain. There's an injury. And then, he never went back down to Iowa again. We saw it last year with Dakota Mermis. Again, a little bit more of a necessity with injuries, but
But that's a great example, actually, because Mermis and Mermis showed that, he can play at the NHL level. I was impressed.
Yeah, I was like pleasantly, like, I always kind of like, I feel like I thought higher of Mermis maybe than the average person, but, I thought last year, like, did he look like a top 4 defenseman? No. But did he look like someone that could hold his own on a third pair on a average team? Sure. Like a guy that's definitely he's a top 6 defender. He should be a top 6 defender on an NHL team somewhere in the league. And I think, again, different players, different stages of their career, but it's not uncommon that we've seen like a player not quite make it, goes down to Iowa, and then whether injury, necessity, good play, they've been called up, never left. So I think I'm right there with you in that, I'm not ruling out that possibility for him this year.
Last thing, Graham Clark played awesome. Do you know the status of his injury? Because he went off on Sunday, blocked a shot, came back, did like one lap, and then was off the ice again.
I have not seen anything on his injury now, but yeah, another guy that's looked nice during playoffs. Like that was the Adam Beckman 1-for-1 swap with the Devils, and 2 very similar types of players, and it was good to see, him putting the puck in the net, because obviously like that was a struggle for Iowa last year, and having someone, granted that he gets healthy, having some scoring punch down there, that's the type of guy, maybe that's the guy that can play with Ogren, right? You get a couple scores, you get some offense, you get some guys that can feed into their creativity, build that confidence that way. So good stuff overall. Yeah, I haven't seen anything on that injury.
Okay. Because that would suck if that derailed the start of his season, which, I mean, preseason has been nuts with so much going on around the league, but also just like within the Wild too, which, thank you. They have not been as busy, we'll say, as other teams, but guys blocking big shots like Graham Clark. Yeah, you're making the coach happy, but this is preseason, and like, oh, it was nasty. It was one of those where like, I was very far away from the action, very high up, and I heard that puck to the bone. So
yeah,
from where I was sitting, it was one that made the crowd go, oh. So that's why I'm hoping for a quick recovery, but it didn't look too good.
Yeah, doing a quick Twitter search to see if we have any updates, but I'm not seeing
hear
anything. Soon. Yeah, so, but and then we'll get to be like, he has a lower body injury.
Yeah, no, really.
Like that was my favorite thing. I think it was Foligno a couple years ago, and he like took a puck very clear, like to the ankle foot, like broke his foot, like was in a walking boot, and they're like, it's a lower body injury.
Like you couldn't even say foot at that point.
It's very clearly a left ankle injury. Like, it's pretty clear, but
hey, if they don't have to reveal anything, they won't.
Yeah, and from my understanding, for those that haven't, like, have always wondered why they're so obscure with it, my understanding is that it's actually from the players, because it's like, oh, it's a right wrist. Like when that player comes back, like they might get an extra whack on the right wrist with a stick.
Right.
Like, people aren't going out there and obviously like trying to like tomahawk it off, but like they'll take an extra shot, sneaky things like that. But like in some cases, obviously it's pretty
shoulder injury. They're gonna, check the shoulder,
right.
Little things like that.
But if a guy tweaks a hamstring or pulls a groin, like it's hard to know really what they did. And for those, so that's allegedly the reasons why. So.
I'm glad Mateo brought this up on YouTube. Middleton's bruising.
Mm-hmm. Which, hey,
that's a good one. That's a good one.
If he's not ready for regular season, Damon Hunt, there's your spot. And I will say the one thing I forgot to bring up, I think it was really telling what they've thought of Damon Hunt's season. I do believe in the last preseason game, if memory serves, he skated alongside Faber.
Nice.
So it's like they gave him a look with, hey, if we get another injury in the top 4 and we scramble, can you play with Faber? I think is a little bit of what that test was.
Yeah.
So
I like it. All right. Let's get to our next segment. Puck, your opinions. What is on tap here today, Brett?
Yeah, so usually, ideally, we're trying to do something analytics-based here, but with, the preseason, I don't ever want to overhype the preseason, because most of the time the home team starts their like half of their NHL roster, and the away team brings like a 95% AHL roster.
The analytics are skewed in preseason.
Right.
It's basically reps for training camp to see what you have in the lower tier guys.
Exactly. So instead, we're just going to kind of go with more of like, I guess, almost like a current events discussion. Like all the discourse on hockey Twitter right now, like regardless of where you're at, has been just preseason. Is it too long? Is it too short? Like how much are these guys really playing? Largely due to we've seen some injuries. It's like some pretty big player names. Tim Stützle, obviously the Patrick Laine. Arbor Jacki has been absolutely losing his mind because of the Laine hit, and then went and cheap shotted Tim Stützle last night with like a chicken wing elbow to like his head, took Stützle out of the game.
Well, Rempe in New York is hitting everybody. Anything that moves,
he's trying
again.
to. He's trying to. I saw a clip last night of him missing like 3 in a row on one shift.
Well, I saw him missing the first one and then hitting 2 guys after. Like,
yeah,
so I mean, like I said, like the preseason is ramped up for some teams and for some players, and for others, like I said, for the Minnesota Wild, which is a good thing. It's being used for what I like it best for.
Yeah, and I think kind of like we have kind of an outline in front of us here, but I think I kind of want to start with that last point in there as like before even getting up the length of the season, like a big piece of the discourse I saw was that these teams should not be playing their division rivals. The reason I think that currently is the case, it has to do with, I think, the CBA and travel.
Well, I was just going to say travel must be part of it because it's like,
yeah, Anaheim doesn't want to fly to Boston for a preseason game. Like I get that, but we've seen,
and you have so many guys at camp, you need to be closer to home because you're going to be assessing them. They're going to be using doctors. Some are going to be staying. Like it's 50 plus players to manage in a 3-4 week span.
Right. But like the discourse I saw is, should it be that way? Like, because what we've seen, like, especially, more in the Eastern Conference, like we saw like tensions really heat up in the Ottawa, New York game, like Montreal and Toronto, obviously with the knee on knee, like, and, you wonder if that's, Minnesota and, the Carolina Hurricanes, is it escalating to that level? Are those types of plays being made? Probably not, but also like,
yeah, I was gonna say I feel like it's definitely not the norm, and that this year is just kind of ramped up for some reason, and we've seen a lot of injuries come out of this 1 week with 2 of the same dance partners.
Yeah, and it's not a unique situation to the NHL either, right? Like we've heard this in the NFL a lot too for football.
Yeah,
it's like it's because like players get hurt, and then the argument is, well, shorten it because players are getting hurt. The arguments, on the other side are obviously like, well, they need the ramp up period. We want to get game reps. We want to see if players fit here. Like player could just easily get hurt, in game 1 of the regular season, like, which all is true. And I agree with all of it, but, I don't know personally that we need 7 preseason games. I think like 4 is probably good. You play 2 home, 2 away. You can, it maybe forces those veteran guys, hey, you got to travel a teeny bit more in the preseason, but we shortened it for you, right? Like you have a little bit longer off season now, but now we're going to make you travel to, now you got to take a flight to Chicago or take a flight to St. Louis or wherever it is.
Yeah. I'm 4 to 6 games is I think the sweet spot with me. And I would say that like the Kaprizovs of your team, right? Your stars, 1 to 2 games max. I would say the middle 6, like the Johanssons and Gaudreaus who've been playing a lot. And the young guys who you're really giving a shot, like Ogren, Heidt, and then like your second year guys or third year guys like Rossi, like those guys play anywhere between 3 to 4 games. Yep. And then you have all the other either invitees, AHL guys who you're just getting as many, and obviously your Heidts and Ogrens as well in that crop if you want to see a little bit more of them. Just like before you decide, like what they did with Heidt, for example. But Ogren will obviously stay a little bit longer. Those guys you play in, there's going to be guys featured probably in every single one because, and I hate to say this, I don't mean to be insensitive, but like you don't really care as much what happens with those guys compared to your guys on the side, right? And so I'm okay with it being 6 games. I don't want it to be more than 6 games. I'm okay with it being 6 games if it's spread around accordingly. I don't want them to shorten the time of camp though, because that's when at least, going back to like the Kaprizovs, that's where they can at least get back into somewhat of an NHL feel. And when things ramp up, and like he's going to come out and play a good game, whether he plays 1 preseason game or 4, it doesn't really matter. It's some of these other guys that you might need to give them that rep. But I do think having camp going on and practices going on is the perfect amount of time here. Like just over a month out, I think that's fine. And there's also some people who are starting to use camp to get back into shape now. Alex Ovechkin, like they did in the 80s.
Yeah. No, I'm with you that the length of preseason as a whole is good. I think especially you look at players like Jared Spurgeon, Marcus Foligno, like some of these guys that dealt with pretty significant injuries, had surgeries. Like it's nice to have, give them a month to, help them get back into game shape, ramp up the speed. And then again, having a couple of those games to kind of like, all right, yep, this is what it's like to get bumped around. This is how I have to go on the forecheck and kind of like just get a feel for contact again and kind of that game speed. But yeah, I mean, I as a GM, you can't love when your star players are getting, taking elbows to the chin and getting hurt, doing whatever else. Like it sucks because, not only did you lose that player in a game that didn't matter, it's now you're without that player for the games that do matter.
Well, yeah, and the key word there is that don't matter. That's just it's so split with half the roster because half the roster it is everything. So for half the roster, their season has started. Their job has started once camp starts, right? Whereas the tier above, they're getting ready. They're getting ready for work, right? It's that week before your first semester in school or that last week of vacation, right? Where like you're getting everything prepped, but you're not quite there yet. Whereas these guys in the AHL, these prospects, like these are the most important games. So it's just that contrast which can make preseason a little dangerous sometimes. Then just guys who have a freaking roster spot just lose their freaking mind on the ice, like in Montreal.
Yeah, it's very, very like just disheartening to be like, well, it's preseason and we gotta jump guys who need obviously the line I think was kind of a bang play, right? Like if you've never played hockey, like it's very easy to like instinctively stick your knee out, right? Like
that wasn't as blatant as the attack on Stützle.
Right. Like I thought that it was way worse. Like there was clearly intent, like he left his feet, lifted the elbow, like that was clearly a shot toward his head. Like I don't think that defenseman, this guy I don't even think he's one of those players to your point that is, his job started day one. He's trying to make the team. He's a good player coming down and he wants to make a stop. Line makes a cut to the inside. The instinctive reaction is to stick the leg out. Like it's not like he came from halfway across the ice, led with his knee and then tried to hit him knee on knee. Like more often than not, it's the knee on knee contact is going to be incidental. Other times where it is intentional, yeah, but although it is more dangerous being on the receiving end of it, like it's dangerous for the guys that dish it out too. Like you're still hitting your knee on somebody else. Like, so like again, and then like after that, like he obviously like, next shift, like basically jumps that guy and like starts wailing on him. Guy's not fighting back. And then, his next game out after getting slapped on the wrist with like a $3,000 fine or whatever it was, he back out there and, headshots one of the better young talents in the game. And then has to fight for that. Like it's stuff in the playoffs. Sure. It's exciting. In the preseason, you don't want to see it.
Yeah. And, but I don't think it's ever going to change because of that contrast of guys who are like this, sure. These are the most important games I've ever had in my entire career. Or like, I'm literally playing and putting it all on the line for a job. Whereas the other ones are like, we're getting through this or using this to get back in shape, or like coach, probably in like Rossi's case, coach told me to do these things in this game and I am here pretty much a glorified practice to do those. Whereas like, again, Rossi looked awesome in his preseason games too, clearly a step above most of the competition, even in a losing effort. But yeah, that's where I don't think it will ever change. And maybe to Mateo's point too, he commented in the live chat here, maybe there's just too many players at camp. But again, I don't mind that because then you can find potential diamonds in the rough for your AHL squad, and you can sit some of the guys who really don't need those playing reps due to everything we just talked about there, and you can give at least 1 or 2 games to guys who like you do want to see a little bit out of right now. But I mean, that's just what's so crazy about this sport in general. It's like people get injured in friggin' in all-star games sometimes. Like it's just hockey's just crazy, man.
It can happen anytime.
Yeah, it's such a high-paced, dangerous sport, even when you're playing it quote unquote for fun.
wasn't, I memory serves, there was I think it was a Vikings player a couple years ago was like in the off season, like tore his like ACL or something, I think, or his Achilles, because there's like an ice storm in Dallas and he slipped on ice. Like,
Yeah.
just, it happens. Injuries happen. And, but I think the argument is that, it could be prevented with fewer games, right? Like there's ways to control the environment better, but
Yeah, 4 to 6 is that sweet spot with me.
yeah, I'm right there with you. So,
and I want to push back on Travis. I don't think it's a cash grab because the tickets are way cheaper.
Yeah,
and it's and it's the arena's barely full. I mean, actually, the Wild show up for those games too, but it's mostly families, like in younger kids, right? So these are the games that like younger parents can get their kids in cheaper. So like, I don't really know if it's that much of a cash grab. I don't know if like they're banking on their preseason sales.
Beyond that, like they're not even broadcasting like away games on Bally's, like where you would get.
There's no commercial.
Money.
There's barely any advertising money.
That's where all your cash grab. And I think if memory serves from preseason games I've been to in the past, like not even all like the concessions and stuff are open. Like, is it a little extra money in the pocket? Yeah, probably. But is that the reason? No. NFL might be a little bit different story because people will tune into those on TV. They'll watch the commercials. Like, I think it's a little bit just because of the sport that it is. It's a little different.
Yeah, for the kiddos and the sickos.
There you go. Yeah,
there you go. Anything else from preseason you want to hit on before we wrap things up here?
Yeah, I have one more, and maybe this will be a topic for Z. But what do you make of this whole Swayman situation?
Oh my God. Well, now like no management, no agent, just talking to the big bosses by himself. It's I mean, I'll say this. Every year I'm surprised when a contract negotiation drags on this long. But then every year I realize there's always one, right? The last big one for me was Drew Doughty in like, what was it, 2011, I think it was.
Yeah, which RIP to him. He's pretty much done for the year.
Yeah, I mean,
and I believe he think he broke his ankle or something like that.
Yep, ankle. Yep.
Right. So
yeah, he's not even gonna be getting a look for another.
Couldn't have happened to a better person.
6 months, which is wild.
For those listening, that was a sarcastic.
Yeah, Brett's favorite player.
I don't like Drew Doughty.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
But hey, I really like.
But again, back to like contract stuff. Like he waited until the day of the first game of the season out of a rookie contract, and that was the biggest one for me. Although apparently that's a trend for him because he showed up 2 hours before the gold medal game, sleeping in for the Olympics. So he likes to keep things to the last minute. But anyways, long of the short of it, there's always somebody who is, whether it's from a rookie contract or their second contract to their third big ticket, there's always somebody who doesn't sign or who waits until the 11th hour to sign. And
right.
I do think he will be a Boston Bruin. Like I don't think the management's going to be like, well, enough with you and enough with this. We're moving on. And I don't think he's going to move on. I think, like I said, we've seen this song and dance before. I think they'll get something done.
Yeah, no, I couldn't believe when that was coming out. Cause I think if you're the Bruins, right, like you're sweating a little bit, right? Because I think in most of these situations, like fans have, it sounds a little bit weird, but like I feel like fans have more loyalty to the players than to the management, right? Like I think like if a team plays bad, like there are certain players that become a target. Like we've had our Martin Skulas and our Victor Rasks and our Marcus Johanssons where we like, yeah, we'd love to blame that guy, but like ultimately if things start to go south, like the fans are going to dive on the coaching, the GM, the owners. Like it's not, they're not going to list all 20 players.
Wild fans went from loving Billy Guerin to hating him in one season.
And if there's
I saw it happen.
Yeah, right. But it wasn't so much on the players. Like people didn't start hating on Kaprizov and stuff. Like, and from my understanding, like Swayman he's very liked, I think, by the Bruins fans. Like he has from what I can tell, a very like infectious personality. Like I remember there's the clip, I think it's in the All-Star game where he made, and like I think it was the Sharks goalie was like walking by him and he tried to do like his hug with Allmark, and the goalie just like walked right by him. And it's like that's like some random goalie. Right? He's like, give me a hug. Like we're at the All-Star game, let's have fun and stuff. Like, so I think the fans are definitely in his corner. And to get back to my point off the tangent there, you got to be sweating a little bit if you're the Bruins, because obviously they made the deal early in the summer with Ottawa to trade away Allmark, where if like, hey, if we knew these, contract negotiations with Swayman weren't going to go well. Could we do the edit undo button for that? For the Allmark trade?
Well, I mean, that was definitely a little bit of a gamble, and I don't think they thought it would be as much of a gamble, obviously. But
because they're going to go from, hey, we have 2 Vezina goalies, we only can keep 1, to, oh, now we don't have any.
Now we're just trying to keep 1, but yeah, I'm confident they're going to get it done.
Yeah, I think that what the Bruins basically did with that whole, if you didn't see the comment or kind of where the story stemmed from, there was a reporter that asked Cam Neely, who's the GM of the Bruins, like, hey, and it was something along the lines of like, why isn't Swayman playing? And he said something along the lines of like, well, he's got $64 million or 64 million reasons to be playing right now, but he's not. And then his agent came out and was like, that's the first time we've heard a number discussed before. Like, we haven't had negotiations. And so I think what the Bruins have done now is like, I don't think they can pay him. Like, they have to pay him more than that now.
Yeah.
I think like you have to go at least like 8.001, like at an average annual value at this point. Like,
because the agent just will not at this point.
Well, right. It's like you basically said, like, we offered him 8. Okay, it's like, well, you better offer him at least 8 then, if that's what you're going to come out and publicly say. So it's a little bit of a mess. But I don't oftentimes have a lot of sympathy for Boston because they've been such a sports and championship starved city region of the country. Mm-hmm. So
yes,
it is nice to see them have to squirm a little bit.
Love Tim Thomas. Yeah,
I'm sure Isha is very, very fond of Boston as a resident BC.
Very much so. But my, just think Cam Neely always brings me sadness because the Canucks gave up on him way too early, and he became a star in Boston. He's also from the hometown or from the town that I was born in too, Campbell River, and same with Rob Brindamore. So Northern Vancouver Island guy. Canucks give up on him after 3 years, and he goes on to become a legend in Boston, a general manager, a movie star, the whole 9 yards.
You can still say one of us, though. That's what we do in Minnesota.
Yes, I can still do that. Where can everybody find you on social media? And again, I have your blog link, which I'll link in the chat here.
Yeah, on social media at @B_Marsh92. Again, if you want to follow the podcast account, it's mostly just retweets from our account, but occasionally might throw some stuff out there as we get into season polls, different things like that. That's at Wildly Informed, and the O is a 0 on Twitter, on the Twitter sphere.
There you go.
If you want to follow me on Instagram, it's the same thing, but that's more like if you want to see pictures of me, my girlfriend, and my nephew is pretty much what's on there. So
I tell people that I just don't really use Instagram personally. Yeah. I'm on there, and it's the same handle at VI Sports Talk, but hit me up on Twitter. I will actually engage. And you can find this podcast, Sota Pod feed, wherever you get your podcast from. It will be posted bright and early on Friday, but we're always going to be streaming live on YouTube every single Wednesday night around 7:30 p.m. Central Time. So join us. We try to be interactive with the chat if it coincides with our topics, but we really appreciate the chat for buzzing today. Thank you all for joining us live. And yeah, we are so close, Brad. We are so close to the start of the season here.
Yeah. What is it? Next Wednesday will be the night before the first regular season game against Columbus. So
there we go. Any final questions from this preseason, which I'm pretty sure all of our questions have been answered, but at that point it'll just be locked and loaded, ready to go.
I think I still have one more, and that's, where do Rossi and Hartman end up? Because I think the line rushes today where Rossi was between Zuccarello and Kaprizov, and he looked, very, very good there last night against Chicago. Again, if you want to go back, listen to the previous episode, we talked about this in detail, but I just have my reservations, not so much about Rossi fitting on the first line, but more so Hartman fitting on that third line, which might be opposite from most. But so that's kind of the last storyline that I'm watching. And then obviously what, is Boldy healthy? And then can Ogren make an impression here in the last week and earn that second left wing spot? I'm doubtful, but I'm still not ruling it out as a possibility yet.
Well, Brett, fun show again. Episode 2 in the books. I'll give the final word to you, my friend.
Yeah, that's all we got. We'll see you next week. We'll probably do some roster reactions, get you primed up for the games against Columbus, what to look for, maybe go over some advanced stats and compare the teams from last year for the analytics section. But until then, see you next time.